2014. This meeting is being live streamed and may otherwise be recorded, filmed or communicated on other media platforms. Recordings of this meeting were made available on the Council's YouTube channel shortly after the meeting. Both Council officers in attendance are reminded to make full use of speak clearly into the microphones available at all times. Reminder that mobile phones should be turned off or put on silent mode. Participants at the meeting should refrain from taking telephone calls. Thank you. Apologies for absence, please.
Apologies were received from Councillors Frank Broadley, Linda Broadley and Richard Morris.
Thank you. I've got no vice chair this evening, so the next item is to a vice chair. Have I got any nominations?
I nominate Chair Councillor David Carlton, if he's willing to do it.
That seconded? Yeah. Okay. David?
Does it put me anything?
Any substitutes at all?
None received.
Registration of interest? Any interest to declare, anybody? No? This is the previous meeting. Page 4 and 6. Are you happy with those? I'll sign.
I move, Chairman.
Yeah, all in favour? Yeah. Action list arising from the previous meeting, page number 7. They've all been actioned.
John Boyce is councillor.
Be complete.
Oh, Mr. Boyce.
Sorry, Chair. I just actually my
On mute.
Not a call. Sorry, Chair. My apologies need to be recorded.
Anybody do sign that?
We can't hear you.
We don't.
Ask him to shout.
Have to shout loud.
Okay.
Carry on.
Carry on.
Share with you and with us.
Sorry, John wants to speak. So.
You can hear him now.
Carry on, Mr. Boyce. I can't hear you. Sorry.
Back on mute.
Councillor Boyce, you might have to rejoin the meeting.
Do you want to carry on now, Councillor Bolton?
It's set up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Action is from the last meeting, item number 5, page 7. The right-hand column says they're all complete. Okay. Petitions and deputations, are we any?
There were none.
None, okay. Item number 7, corporate performance. Mrs. Hatton, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. I'm here to present the update on the corporate performance for quarter 3, 22-23. In January 22, the LGA conducted a peer review and 2 of the key recommendations were for a new vision and a corporate plan to be created by members. The vision was signed off in September and the new corporate plan is in development. This report contains KPIs which relate to continuous improvement in line with our corporate plan 2019 to 2024 and our statutory KPIs that have been delivered as business as usual. There are 44 continuous improvement key performance indicators. 40 are to be reported in quarter 3. There are 24 statutory key performance indicators and 19 are due to be reported in quarter 3. Both the continuous improvement and statutory KPI indicators are categorised by each objective and each service delivery arm. Each target has been graded using red, amber and green status ratings. There are 2 other ranks, blue for indicators where work is yet to begin and white for the system that is outside the control of the council delivery and therefore cannot be ranked. I would like to now refer members to the corporate performance section 2.4, where I will go through continuous improvement KPIs. So for the continuous improvement KPIs, out of the 44, as I said, 40 were due to be reported at the end of Q3. Of that 40, 36 were green status and 4 are amber status. There were no red statuses. This equates to 90% green and 10% amber, 0% red. In comparison to the second quarter of 2022-23, July, August, September, percentages were as follows: 88% green and 12% amber, 0% red status. Looking at our continuous improvement KPIs under our corporate objectives, we can see that 9 KPIs are green and on target. 1 KPI was amber for building, protecting and empowering communities. 4 KPIs were green and 1 KPI was amber for growing the borough economically, and 23 KPIs were green and 2 were amber for providing excellent services. Looking at the KPIs by department, we can see that 12 KPIs were green and 1 were amber for built environment, 6 KPIs were green and 1 KPI was amber for customer service and transformation, 9 KPIs were green and 1 KPI was amber for finance and resources, and 9 KPIs were green, with 1 being amber for law and democracy. Moving on to the statutory key performance indicators, out of 24 indicators, 19 are due for reporting at Q3. Out of the 19, 17 were green statuses, 2 were amber. This equates to 89% green and 11% amber, 0% red status. In comparison, the second quarter of 22-23, July, August and September, percentages were 88% green and 12% amber, again 0% red status. So looking under these objectives, the corporate ones for under each divisional area, 6 KPIs were green for building, protecting and empowering communities. There were no statutory KPIs for growing the borough economically, and 11 KPIs were green, 2 KPIs were amber for providing excellent services. Looking at the KPIs, statutory KPIs by department, we can see that all 8 KPIs were green for built environment. There were no statutory KPIs for customer services and transformation. 3 KPIs were green and 2 KPIs were amber for finance and resources. All 6 KPIs were green for law and democracy. Chair, if I can hand back to you now to take members through exception reporting. If there are any questions, myself or any other head of service will be happy to answer these.
Any questions so far? No? Okay, carry on then, Ms. Sutton.
Thank you, Chair. Moving on then to operational updates. If there's any questions from anybody?
Right, we go through item number 3 on page 13. Built environment, any questions on that? Finance? No, they're all amber. Move on to page 15. Customer service and transformation, Mrs. Hack.
Mr. Chair, it's not regarding customer service and transformation, it's the recycling rate. Just wanted to know, have the recycling rate gone down recently? Historically, has it always been at 45%, or did we receive much higher rate? And why is that going down? I know it's been mentioned the green waste collection has not taken place, and that could be part of it, but are there any other particular reasons for the recycling rate to be going down rather than going up?
I'll take that question. Obviously, waste isn't in my area, but it's an area that I'm quite familiar with, so I'll try my best to answer it for you. In terms of the 45% target KPI, I'm not entirely sure whether that was an aspirational or whether that is around where we were expecting to be. We, so far in this financial year, haven't met that 45%. We've always been amber, so we've always been just below it, so that perhaps is something that we do need to review. But we have certainly tried, for continuous improvement purposes, to push ourselves to the highest that we thought was achievable. What it was historically is before my time as a head of service. So we would need to look back. I'd need to get Philippa to speak to the waste manager and look back for you and see where we were. In terms of this particular month, it is obviously due to the garden waste being uncollected, but I know that the waste team are working hard to try and engage more schools and doing some road shows and different things like that. So I believe it was an aspirational target of 45%, and we've always been there around the 40% mark. Again, it will need to be reviewed with the new KPI set in April.
One of the reasons is the amount, the items we collect has been changed by the contractor case back. They want to accept various things we recycled in the past. So such things as shoes, bags and clothing, they won't accept anymore, so there's a lot of weight in that. So that's one of the reasons why it's reduced. Mr. Kaufman.
Well, it's reminding us and telling us just now, Chairman, remember that we as a local authority, when we were allowed to do it, had a very profitable recycling business which was used to offset. Our depot was actually very efficient and people followed us, and that's the type of stuff we've been forced to lose to subsidise our council tax over the years, and this is why another reason, every source of income that we've managed to produce, the government or somebody somewhere has stopped us. And I think we ought to be grateful for you reminding us of that one.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, law and democracy. Anything on that? No? Okay, move on again to environment update. Planning, economic regeneration. Any questions on that at all on page 17? No? Mrs. Hack.
Thanks, Chair. It's not a question, it's just a comment regarding the 97% satisfaction rate. That's very pleasing to see. Because I know that in planning department we've been having some issues, so it's just a welcome addition that the figures are going up in the right direction.
Okay. Move on to the housing capital programme. See what's been done there for the capital programme for housing. Void property repairs. Mr. Thorpe. We've got two new contractors, one for the gas, one for void properties. How are they performing at the moment? Are they working efficiently and on time and on budget?
Mr. Chair, I can provide an update on that. In respect to the void property repairs, since UK Gas Services commenced working on the council's empty properties in January, several void properties have been inspected by our housing inspectors following vacation of the property by the tenant, with the necessary works ordered and subsequently completed by the contractor. Works on all 7 properties have been completed within the timescales that the council set and also within the tender schedule of rates. In terms of gas compliancy, we continue to monitor performance through regular meetings with our new contractor, Aaron Services, who took over the contractor in October 2022. We are 100% compliant in terms of all annual gas servicing and have been consistently since December 2022.
Thank you. Now, can you confirm that the void properties are inspected by the members of staff employed by this authority? He's the person who specified works to be done, not the contractor.
Yes, I can confirm that our own building or housing inspector will go out, view the property, establish what works needs to be done, and then provide that data to the contractor along with the timescale as well. And our own inspector will also go and inspect the property after the works have been completed too.
Thank you. Let me minute it all, please. Okay. Housing options and homelessness. Got the figures there for that. Loans for Ukraine. Light bulb on page 19. There's an amount of money outstanding there. Can you explain what's going to happen to that money that's not being spent at the moment? Mr. Thorpe?
Chair, do you mean the 326,297?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so, sorry, Chair. So that is the amount that has been spent at the end of that quarter.
Okay, and how much money is left over?
I'm not exactly aware of the amount left over, Chair, but I can get that information before we would circulate it.
We ought to know how much is left over and what it's going to be spent on. Mr. Lloydell?
Share an experience with you, and there'll be some questions that the officers might want to take back when they meet with Lightbulb. A situation where the residents had to wait several weeks to get a map put in. And the question is that by the time it's been done, unfortunately, the spouse might not be with us, so it's that desperate. However, I made some inquiries with regards to support this resident, and of course the where she lives, it's a landlord, but a private landlord, houses. And obviously the process is you've got to get permission from the landlord to do the work. They're going to pay for it. If they say no, who pays for it? It comes back to the DFDs. Cut a long story short, I spoke to a lady at Lightbulb, and she was very good, very helpful, and told me exactly how it all worked. And I asked, why is the delay? Why, if it's been authorised by not one but two people, the work is still not being done? The landlord has not given us permission, but then you speak to the resident and say, well, the landlord has given permission, and given permission right at the very beginning. So there was this communication issue. The other issue is about just the contractors. And she said, we've got one contractor that will do that, but we've got another contractor that won't do it. That's when the delay comes. I said, have you got more than one contractor? She said, no, but I don't think that may be right. When you look at the delays, probably 24 weeks, which is slightly above the average, is that because they haven't got sufficient contractors to do the work? And it rang the alarm bells to think, well, if they've only got two contractors, one will do ramps, one won't, then you can understand where the delay's coming from. So it's just an observation that perhaps maybe you want to take that sort of thing back to see whether or not they have got sufficient contractors to carry out the work, which is contributing towards these unnecessary delays, especially when you talk about people who may not be with us by the time they get round to actually doing it, or when they do it, the person's not there anyway, because they passed away. That's how serious this particular case was. And again, I have to say, the lady I spoke to at Turning Point was very, very helpful, very open and honest. And obviously, she was probably concerned with why they're in this situation where they're having to scratch around for people to do the work. That doesn't seem. There may be a loophole in what the Turning Point has to put up with.
I believe Mr. Thorpe is our officer who contacts Lightbulb. Is that right, Mr. Thorpe?
Yes, that's correct, Chair. And just to emphasise in the report, we have said that currently there is a combination of factors causing some delays, one of those being availability. So I will certainly take that back to Lightbulb. And also to say that if members do have any concerns regarding a particular case, then if they bring them to either myself or Chris, the housing manager, then we can pick them up directly with Lightbulb as well.
Just to say that the work has now been done and the client is satisfied that they're able to get in and out of the system.
Mrs. Hack?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question on Roy Properties. Are we meeting our target of turning them around within, was it 6 to 8 weeks? doing the repairs, because I know previously it was taking much longer to get them repaired and back into having the tenants again, new tenants. And regarding light bulb, just a quick question. Are we still topping up the amount of money you pay to light bulb from our reserves? No. Okay, if I could just
Right.
have the answer to your property.
The answer is for light bulb, no, we don't top it up anymore. The money's there, that's what they spend.
And are we meeting the target of void properties, doing the repairs in the time allocated 6 to 8 weeks or something?
I've just got the figures in front of me. The target is 39 calendar days. January this year, we were achieving 20 days, so we were within target.
Okay. Right, we now move to page 20, finance update, revs and bends. Any questions on that? Mr Bentley?
Thank you, Chair. Question on the revenue calls and the collection rates. Obviously, you've spelled out exactly how many calls we get in, how many have answered, and we're consistently doing 90% of answered calls, which is very good, considering the amount of money that the team is having to administer. But it still means that we're missing 10% of calls. Is there any specific reason for that? Do we know whether that 10% of people who call actually call back? Or are they just completely missed? And also with the collection rates, we're obviously down on collection rates for council tax and NMDR. Do we have any plan in place to try to recover that money? Because obviously this council needs the revenue.
I'll take the collection rate query. So in terms of where we are in relation to collection funds, so like you say, we are below target. So I think it's important to acknowledge, obviously, it was a stretch target when it was set as well. So it was always going to be difficult to achieve. It's not been lowered in terms of where we are in respect of cost of living crisis or because of the pandemic. But in terms of whether we have got an action plan to stretch ourselves to achieve that target, we have got an action plan in place, a collection fund action plan. So I think that came to this committee in September, and we are going to be reporting on progress against that action plan to PFD committee at the end of the month. And in terms of those actions, obviously, once they are implemented, they do need time to embed and for that impact of that to flow through and actually hit an impact on the collection rates. But there is an action plan in place.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Any follow-up?
The calls.
Should I just the call, I suppose the call monitoring side of things, where it fits into Bev's area, I'm probably a bit more familiar with the stats. In terms of the abandoned call, there's no way of knowing for sure that every person calls back, but generally speaking, across all call centres, you will get a good percentage of those people getting through, particularly in lines like revenues, where obviously they do actually need to speak to an officer to get an action carried out, a bill changed, make a payment, etc. So there is no way the system can tell us, 7% of the 10% call back you did lose genuinely 3. All you can do is drive that down as much as possible. Looking at the average wait times here, I mean, they certainly wait a lot longer for these benefits inquiries than they would in customer services. So I think our average wait times, it will be coming up soon, so don't quote me on it, are around that 1.5. And so 1.5 to 2 minutes is generally how much people would abandon. For us, it's much quicker because the inquiries may be more varied or less important. But in this area, having looked at revenues and benefits before, that's quite normal wait time. So it's just really about the team focusing as much as possible to try and drive the abandon rate down, because obviously you want to answer every call first time.
Okay.
Next question.
Okay, we'll move on then to customer service information update. The service improvement. Any questions on page 22? Page 23 is the press release being put out. Page 24 is IT.
So what page you on?
24.
24, right, yes.
Yes, Mr. Kaufman.
I would like to ask how far we are progressing in making our garden waste collection service more efficient. After I don't know how many years I've managed to finish up in this committee actually dealing with it. In the past I've expressed that the system we've currently got is not the most efficient system. I am concerned for several things. One that I'll comment more about this later about our magazine that we now send out in the mail that just got out with the council tax bill. And it states pretty clearly that as far as the garden waste is concerned, it restates a policy that we seem to have here that the customer is always wrong. I am concerned. I want a way of picking up the residents that move to this borough late and want to join the garden waste scheme without them being told they have to spend the full amount and it can't be prorated. I have mentioned before that we live in a plastic-free OB, and I want to avoid us having the expense of having to print things, plastic things to stick on our dustbins, to tell the garden waste bins, to tell them that it's okay to collect it when the district down the road manages to have a machine and they don't have to impose that thing out. I'm concerned that we expect our clients to have to apply for one every year, when every other business that I know actually give you a discount if you agree to pay by direct debit so they don't have that trouble. I'm concerned that because any other business would want to capture business that we don't capture now, that we can't go to a system where that when you join, you tell the computer you join for 12 months, and in 12 months' time, even though we have a 9-month collection period, to take the money out of my bank account. There's a whole lot of things here based on what I feel that is put in there that the customer comes last. If I was running that as a commercial business, I certainly wouldn't do it that way, and I'm concerned it's in there. Have we made any progress in trying to improve the way we administer that service?
Right, Ms. Hatton.
I'll try and answer this on behalf of Philippa, if I may. She has been working with the customer service team and the finance team to look into the viability of doing direct debit. I believe that was, if we can all remember, it was at the last committee that was asked by members. So she's working up a report with regards to that to present to members. I can't tell you exactly where she's at, if I'm honest, but I do know, and having seen some of the emails moving around, that has certainly moved forward. But we will feed back your comments today with regards to it and make sure it is included in the report for you.
It should be coming to the next service delivery committee.
There we go. Okay.
With a view to making sure that improvements are installed for next year. I was hoping to get it this year, but we've missed out on that one.
Let's see what the report says when we get it.
Thank you.
Right. Anything else, Mrs. Hack?
Chair, could I just ask another question? I know Councillor Kaufman mentioned people who move into the borough during the year and they should be able to subscribe for pro rata. Could we have some figures that how many requests do we get during the year for those for any such subscriptions, please?
Mrs. Hatton can come up with that figure. Okay. Right, move on to page 26, Law Democracy, Environmental Health. Any questions on that? No, and I've led to understand that the monitoring for the wheeze in South Wixton will start fairly shortly.
Yep.
Private sector housing, any questions on that? Selective licensing? Licensing at all? No. Corporate assets team? No. Allotments? I did meet with the Elston Lane allotment people a few weeks ago, and we've discussed various things that we can actually help each other do, and that is now working its way through the system. Hopefully we can have a better relationship with the Elston Lane allotment society in the near future. Cemeteries? No. Car parks? Mr Kaufman, here you go, just by shorthand.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I was disappointed, I suppose we're all disappointed to see that we've had one of our machines vandalised on the cash pinch. So I just wonder whether we ought to at least consider the idea of when these machines are replaced, go cashless. I regret to say that, and I know maybe some people that miss putting cash into the machines, but I regret to say I think the days of having those machines with full of money are gone, even in upmarket Oakley. So I wonder when there are replacements. Also, while we're on car parks, again my disappointment with our borough. I'm disappointed that on page 2 of our borough, there's a little bit that says parking permits available. Now, if I was trying to persuade people to have parking permits to encourage them to regularly come into our town centres, I would at the very least, this goes to the residents of the borough, I'd at least tell the readership of this magazine that most of them that get it are entitled to half-price parking permits. This strikes me as it's something that members decided and other people have decided they don't really want the public to know about. I think this is a way of not selling something, and I'd like an assurance that it is not the idea of not selling something, that we've put it in like that. And I'd ask why. I don't know whether any of our leads who saw this before it went out, but I have to say I don't think this is selling the services of the council in a way that promotes them, in the way any other commercial organisation would be selling the services which bring us in an income. So I'm disappointed at that. I'm also disappointed at the point of sale on the machines. It still doesn't say, tell the residents that they can get a season ticket, being a resident at half price. So I'm rather disappointed. I'm pleased that the car parking, despite that, I'm despised that the car parking charging system routine is working. But I'm disappointed in the way that we're promoting it as a borough.
Right, Mr Gill, to answer that, then I'll bring in.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points on that. Firstly, I dispute the fact that we are not promoting car parking charges and the permits, because if we were, we wouldn't have sold nearly 5,000 permits, given that there's only 24,000 residential properties in the borough. So I think we're doing particularly well on that. With regard to the wording in that leaflet, if we're going to present to the public the options available, that would have taken at least one page or possibly even a page and a half of that booklet, because to be fair to them, we can say that it starts at £25 for people that are residents, but then we have to say that for people that are non-residents, it's £50. There are various combinations. We did produce a sheet to go into the machines as requested. Unfortunately, the font was about 9 point because it was almost impossible to get all of the information on. Since then, I've been liaising with Councillor Ridley and also with Councillor Hack. We do have a new form of words to go on, and that is going to be going on the machines as of next week, because unfortunately it requires somebody to go around and physically put it into the machines, and we don't have a member of staff available at the moment. And finally, on the point with regard to the security, I'm not going to discuss things here about what we're doing, but we are making steps to make the machines more secure so that we can retain cash collection for those people that want to use it.
Come back, Mr. Corfin, then Mr. Bentley.
Yeah, I think I asked the question as to whether it was a scheme not to sell. I haven't asked for a tariff. I mean, there are things here that I would have thought it would have. I didn't ask for a tariff, but I would have thought the wording like half-price season tickets for residents are the thing, as this is intended for residents, and going to residents' houses, that's without putting a tariff on, you're quite right, it's a complicated tariff. So I would have put more than that. So I'm disappointed. I'm also a bit disappointed that it's taken, was it January a year to get this thing up? We still haven't got a member of staff who is able to go up and hear them. Just my disappointment, but this is the last meeting.
Right, we'll move on. Mr. Bentley.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things. With regard to cash and cashless, I know I possibly am unusual in that I can't say that I've actually carried cash with me for over 2 years now, because it's a cashless society, basically. There's not many people that do, because they all use those.
What's that?
I know a lot of machines do use those.
Is that plastic?
Yes, it is plastic. It's quite a valuable piece of plastic. So, whilst I can understand what Councillor Corfin is saying going cashless, there are possibly people that don't. So there are all sorts, and we've got to cater for all sorts of people. But I think we should aspire to it. I think we should aspire to getting rid of the cash, because that stops the break-ins. Because you can't break in and take that, because you take it with you. Okay. But one question with regard to the cash machines, could you confirm if they are actually connected to a telephone network? And if so, what type?
The machines are all Wi-Fi enabled. There has been an issue, and we are aware that some of the machines have had difficulty working. That is because we believe that they have been turning off the 3G in the area. Now the machines are all enabled for 4G, and they were all visited last week by the manufacturers just to ensure that the correct switch was in the right place. And since then, touch wood, things have improved in terms of reliability on the machines. We are aware that there is some difficulty on some of them because they're all solar powered. So I've instructed my staff to start looking at the possibility and potential of making some of the mains run so that it will speed up the processing, because obviously it's not been used, it's got a wake up, and that takes time, and do find that difficult. But we are looking to upgrade them in terms of making them mains connected.
So the switching off of the 3G network over the next few years will not affect us?
No, we are informed that the machines are 4G compatible.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mrs. Hack.
Thank you, Chair. It's regarding the lights in the car park. Is there an update on that? Are they working? Is that work being carried out? Or are they still not working?
We have received.
Inside the street.
Yep. We've received notifications today. Although the lights are on our land, they're normally serviced by county because we don't have the officers with the experience to do them. So I'm aware that today I've been informed that the work has been programmed in by county, and hopefully will be done over the next few days.
Thank you. Right. Having said that, we'll move on to page 28, Community and Wellbeing Leisure Services, by SLM. Any question on that at all? Page 28, 29. 30, 31. No questions about SLM? Mrs Hack.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, we mentioned that membership number going down and other gyms are opening in the area. Does SLM do their price comparison and offer any other offers to attract new members?
Mr Gill.
They just come back to the council to renegotiate their contract.
Thank you, councillor. I mean, the position is with regard to this piece of the report. It says leisure services provided by SLM, and actually this is what they have provided as well in respect of the way they operated. In terms of their offer, I am not aware that they provide any other particular benefits. Sometimes they do a half price 3-month trial. It's fair to say that their prices have increased over the year. I think at least twice because of the cost of living crisis and the energy crisis. And the gym on the Harbour Road there does provide a much cheaper service because that gym, as I understand it, is an unmanned gym. It's one where you go in and just use machinery. There is a reference in there with regard to car parking and the fact that the new gym has car parking and charged. We have requested on a number of occasions from SLM to provide us with evidence that the car parking is impacting on the membership. And to date, we've not been able to reach a firm decision on whether or not there was any impact. And as far as the gym on the Harbour Road, it did come as a bit of a surprise to SLM because it wasn't a matter of granting planning permission, it was a matter of a lawful development, proposed lawful development, and as stated on planning committee, we appreciate that's not a question of planning, that's a question of law, and subject to it complying with all laws, then the council had no option but to issue the certificate, hence it opened up with very short notice.
Okay. Mr Bentley? No? No other questions on that? Move on to health and wellbeing. Youth engagement. Page 33, community safety. Antisocial behaviour. No. Right, appendix 2 on page 35. No. Okay. Any other questions on this report at all? We're all happy to note the report. Mr. Kaufman?
Yeah, with my cataracts, I'm having a bit of trouble reading this, but is this, are you taking it now, dealing with customer services and customer facing, or is it?
Oh, you ask your question, ask your question, Mr. Kaufman. Ask your question now.
Well, I've seen the tables here, and it's quite obvious that people do value face-to-face contact. If I could find it somewhere, it's 88% of what the people asked. Are you dealing with that later?
I'm doing that in a minute, but not on that report yet.
Okay, all right.
Saturn, do you wish to start the report? Your little presentation? Because that might answer Mr. Kaufman's question.
Absolutely.
Presentation duty. There's a presentation.
Have we lost Mr. Boyce, by the way? I've not seen him. Oh, is he?
No, shame.
Okay, yeah.
Shoot.
I'm just going to do a short presentation for you with regards to the customer experience strategy and consultation results. So as you'll be aware, we did a consultation on the customer service experience for residents, and we did that between 2nd of November and 23rd of December. And really wanted to get as many residents, businesses and key stakeholders' views as much as possible. We took an approach, rather than writing the strategy first and going out and seeing what people thought of quite a detailed strategy, to actually put some proposals together. So from feedback that we'd had before from members, from stakeholders and from residents and businesses on some of the things that we believe that people may want. So we had some proposals and we did a survey approach to the and we got some feedback regards to that. And we've used that feedback to directly drive the strategy. So in terms of how we promoted that, we did it in a variety of ways. We did an article in the Leicester Mercury. We did obviously the normal methods on the website. We used the delivery service for all our email subscriptions. We sent out emails to different people, different groups of customers across the borough. We used our social media channels for those who use that. We put a promotion message on our phone lines, so we'd be calling up as asking to speak to the council, heard that we were doing surveys and that we were able to request a form sent to them or do the survey on the telephone. We also put some paper boxes in our sheltered schemes. That was an idea when we went and visited the tenants forum. They came up with that idea, which is a great one, and we got some surveys done that way. We put an article in the Our Borough, a paper leaflet as well, and we used our community wellbeing, they know all the different community groups, to communicate with them, to tell them about the survey and encourage participation. We really wanted to encourage participation, particularly from those who we felt maybe digitally excluded. So for people that maybe wouldn't use the internet or wouldn't stumble across it on our website. We wanted to make sure that we did some face-to-face consultation. So we went out into the community and we met with different groups like the senior citizen groups, all the different residents forums. We, as I said, went to the tenants forum. We went to community groups like the Hub Club Cafe. We also went to things like seated activity groups. As again, from the community wellbeing team, they felt that those people wouldn't be able to do it online themselves, so we went out and did paper surveys with them. We tried and get the younger voice. We went out to the local college and tried to speak to the people there about it. And we also did a face-to-face pop-up session in each of the town centres and got people to complete the surveys that way. In terms of how many we received, we had 343 surveys completed. Vast majority of people completing it were residents, but we did get some businesses as well engaging, other stakeholders, other different groups as well. Some members completed it, visitors, etc. And we did have a split across the areas, Wigston being the highest turnout in terms of 183, and 99 people from OB, South Wigston was 45, and a few people not in the borough also completed it, and perhaps worked in the borough or could have been our stakeholder groups. So in terms of demographics, this slide shows you the demographics in the report, shows you that, so I won't go through that in detail. Again, we tried to tackle different groups of people across the council best we could. So in terms of one of the questions that we asked, we talked about the contact channels prior to COVID-19. And so this is when we did have Welsh Street face-to-face. We wanted to see how people were contacting us then. So out of the 343 people, 72 of them were just using face-to-face as their only primary method of contacting the council. 60 were using the telephone only, and 18 were using online, 3 in email. And then the rest is a combination of all the different methods, and you can see the breakdown there. When we asked them why they were using that method before, we found really that convenience, ease of use, preferred way to contact, that was the feedback that we were getting. Only 4 of them choosing need, so most people were saying it's just a real preference for them. It was convenient, so they liked to use whichever method they chose. In terms of contact channels now, to measure it, we asked the same people, had they had the need to contact us since the COVID-19 pandemic, and 199 of them have had the need to do so, and out of those, 73 of them were using telephone only, so it correlates to the ones that perhaps were face-to-face before only, maybe channel shifting over to the telephone only, that was their preferred approach, 20 online only, and then 106 being a combination of all the methods. In terms of satisfaction, we got a good level of satisfaction overall. Excellent, good and satisfactory were high. There was 28 people not satisfied and some suggestions for website improvements. Generally speaking, the reasons for them being unsatisfied did vary, but a common theme was that they preferred face-to-face and that was the channel of their preference, and because that was no longer an option, they felt it was less personal, the way in which they were interacting with the council. So moving on to the proposal questions, you'll be familiar, as we shared this with you previously, we put 4 proposals together and this is what people said. So in terms of the appointment hubs, we asked people how important they would find to have an introduction of a face-to-face appointment be. 159 people saying very important and that they would use the service, and in brackets you can see the breakdown in Wigston, Oadby and South Wigston, and not in the borough. 143 said they might not use it themselves, but they did think it was a good idea for other people. So a real positive indicator that that is what customers are wanting. So as a result, we are going to introduce 3 appointment hubs across the borough. We have 3 town centre locations. We have found them and we're just in the process of negotiating agreements and costs at the moment. We believe that they'll be on these days of the week. So in South Wigston, it would be a Tuesday in the morning. In Oadby, it would be Wednesday in the morning into the early afternoon. And in Wigston, it would be in the afternoon. Now, we do have an option as we are moving to Brox Hill to make that the appointment hub. We wanted to seek your views on this because I know that you're closer to the residents. You may feel it's more appropriate to put that in the town centre, but indication from the stats are that people would use the actual Brox Hill. But equally, as I say, we've already got a location in mind for Oadby and an agreement in principle in place. But obviously, it would be slightly more cost effective to do it under our own head office. So if we can just seek some views on that after, that would be fantastic. So in terms of the appointments, the way the hub will work, customers will call up to make the appointment. Of course, the officer is going to offer to make to do the inquiry on the phone if they want them to do that there and then. If they would like to continue the face-to-face appointment, then that will be booked for them, and then we will send a relevant officer across the council to meet them. So if they had a particular inquiry, let's say it was benefits related, we will try and get a benefits officer to meet them for the appointment. But if it is a general inquiry, then obviously the customer services team would be the officer that would attend. We will report stats and the use of appointments into Service Delivery Committee, like we normally do, with our other customer service stats. And then we'll conduct a yearly review to see how it's gone and what the usage is like and whether we want to make any changes. So reception point was something else we consulted on. So we asked people how important they thought an introduction of the reception point at Brox Hill would be. 187 people said they thought that was very important and that they would use the service. 99 said that they might not use it themselves, but they did think it was a good idea for others. So a real positive response to that. So as a result, we want to introduce a reception point at Brox Hill. We will recruit a new officer and that will be managed within the customer services team. The officer will carry out a variety of tasks. They will play the main role as a receptionist at the building, but they will play other tasks as well. So obviously meet and greets, all the different, they'll be able to deal with basic inquiries, anything complex or involved a payment. They wouldn't take payments at the reception. They would use the customer phone and speak to a colleague in the customer service section. They will be able to do things like book appointments, accept forms, photocopy things, take forms in, give forms out. Things like key returns could come back as well. So in terms of room hire or allotment keys, they could be handed in or collected from there. They'll do a variety of admin tasks as well corporately. They'll do things like build-in alarm checks, take posting, deliveries, etc. They'll also play a role in terms of responding to customer emails, looking at updating the website and editing things, online forms, etc., and any other corporate admin duties. So in terms of reception opening times, to make it as cost effective as possible, we would look to open that at 9:15, between 9:15 and 4:15 every day. We will close for lunch between 12 and 12:30. Obviously the customer service telephone line would still be open. It would just be the reception itself that would close for that short half an hour period to give receptionists a break. The officer will work 35 hours a week, just a little bit, 9 o'clock in the morning to 4:30, so we can make sure the reception is ready and closed effectively. And closing at lunch for that 30 minutes will just allow us to start that with one officer. If that officer is off sick or they have annual leave, then the customer services team would cover. The other two proposals we looked at were virtual appointments, looking at introducing those, and web chat as well. These were popular, not as popular as the face-to-face methods, but they're still popular, which is still really positive, especially considering some of the groups of people were less digitally inclusive. So it's good to see that people were thinking it was at least a good idea. In terms of the virtual appointments, 70 people saying that they felt that was very important and they would use that. And then 136 people saying that they might not use it themselves, but they did think it could be a good idea for others. Out of the 70% face-to-face people that I went and spoke to, just to feed back to members, a lot of those people were quite elderly and they'd got used to doing virtual appointments with their doctors over COVID, and they found that that was a good alternative because they wouldn't need to leave home. So that was a real positive one. In terms of web chat, 84 people said that they thought that was very important for us to look at introducing, and 107 people said that they thought it wasn't, they perhaps wouldn't use it themselves, but it was a good idea for others. So slightly less popular, but it is something that we will consider as part of the strategy and ongoing, looking at how we can be more just digitally inclusive. So as a result, we will explore the introduction of virtual appointments because this is fairly low cost. We do have technology that would allow us to do this already. So it's something that we can have a look at introducing, and we'll look at and consider that by autumn this year, so we can move quite quickly on that. In terms of the web chat, there will be much more cost involved in that because we would need to buy software to do it. So we will conduct a viability and cost analysis to make sure that is something that we would, is viable for us to move forward. So we've targeted that for autumn 2024. I'm going to open the questions at the end, if that's okay, Councillor Crawford.
That's all right.
Okay, fabulous, thank you. Home appointments, we asked about that. 60% of people said that they wouldn't use home appointments. And customers that were looking at using them were also very largely open to the virtual appointments for these reasons I gave earlier. We are already doing home visits in some places, for example, housing, environmental health, financial inclusion officer. So at this stage, we haven't got any points to introduce home appointments. In terms of website use, out of the 343 customers that we surveyed, 291, which is 85% of them, do have access to internet at their home. And out of the 343, 241, so that's 70%, have used our website in the last 12 months. So that was really positive. We got some really useful feedback about the website. Being perfectly honest, some of it was good, some of it was bad. And we already have the ambition to make our website better and more user-friendly. So we're going to use that feedback to drive our website improvement programme forward. So next steps with regards to this is the strategy will go to PFD for approval. Alongside the strategy, I have a full implementation action plan that will outline all the actions that we need to take over the 3 years. And we're building a yearly review system. Like I mentioned earlier, we would want to review things like the appointment hubs to see their use. But again, we'd also want to make sure that we move with the times, and if any other technology comes out that could be better than something like web chat, we maybe want to change our actions to look at that. So we'll really make sure we do a real thorough yearly review and report in to members on that. So I'll open for any questions now.
Right, we've got a number of people want to ask questions. First of all, I think what we need to decide first of all this evening
is that we want a customer service section in each of the town centres. That's all 3 town centres. We all agree on that point going forward. Gorfman, yes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, so that's where we started, that's the starting point. Now, Mr. Corcoran was first to put his hand up.
Right. Well, first of all, can I say this is really interesting and well done. You've brought a lot of information out. It's great. It's interesting reading. Thank you for the presentation. A couple of questions because I probably just didn't hear right. The hubs that we have just decided to go into the town centres, they are planned to be by appointment only. But could there be any day of the week, or are you saying it's Tuesday afternoon for Oadby, for instance? And my only concern with that is, I would have hoped, as by appointment ones, they could be a bit more flexible on the day. I anticipate that some weeks you wouldn't need to make any appointments. But as by appointment, I would hope, because if Tuesday is the day I have to go to work or go to the hospital or something like that, I can never get in to the council. That's one suggestion. The other suggestion is I'm a bit concerned about the pub in Box Hill closing for 30 minutes. I think if most businesses with 100 people in the premises, or no, 30, 40 people in the premises, should be able to get cover for that 30 minutes. And I would, if it could possibly be organised, if it's for people on a drop-in, I don't want people to have to walk a quarter of a mile from the nearest bus stop up to where the hub is and find that you're closed for half an hour or just missed it or whatever it is. So if possible, I think we should do the same with that hub at Rockcharles. We've fought hard to get their telephone service. And I think down here it says somewhere that it was a good idea that we opened it. We're taking credit for us opening over the lunchtime our telephones. I think I read there somewhere. Somewhere I read it was a good idea. So I like this idea of appointments by appointment in the three hubs. I anticipate it's for people that are relying on public transport, because it's a good quarter of to the office from the bus stop. That's why you need to have it. And if you could possibly avoid closing for 30 minutes by reorganising people. But other than that, it's really interesting, and thank you for the work.
Okay, thank you. Mrs Morris?
Thank you, Chair. I didn't really think we'd get away without this meeting. I don't want to see the half-hour closure. However, I don't expect you to find somebody who's working in the office that day. My suggestion is what I used to do for people, which is split it into a part-time job. You have two people doing it. The hours are exactly the same. One works till 1 and one starts at 1 and does the afternoon. And if you're really clever, you also get part of their contract to say that if the other one's off sick or if there's holiday cover, they cover for each other. Which means you've always got somebody there and you're not taking away from another team. Your hours are exactly the same. You've just got more bodies and more flexibility.
Okay, Mrs Hutton?
Thank you. Thank you for your comments, Councillor Kaufman. In terms of the idea behind the closure of the lunch half an hour, I should say, a twofold. If the customer services team would have been based in Box Hill, within the actual Box Hill centre itself, it wouldn't have been a problem at all. We would have just sent somebody from customer services down to cover reception for that lunch period. But because they're at the depot, because that's a much more suitable environment for a call centre, Councillor Morris will appreciate that it does need to be quiet and needs to be soundproofed, etc., as best as it can be. That it would be, one of those offices coming over. And with the way agile working works, you're not. Although we will have a booking system for people being in and out, it's about who could you get to cover during that half an hour period, and would they have the right skill set, would they be the right representative for the council? So those were the concerns. We certainly did look at job share as a possibility, so that's something I could take back, and our only concern with that is that we may not attract it. Often we did job share, for example, when we managed Elstree. Well, we had 7 job share people over, so to cover over the lunch periods, because that was obviously really important. We always attracted the morning, and we really struggled to attract the afternoon. So it is something we could look at trying, failing that if we can't recruit to the two, the identical share, then we probably would have to look at doing that. But that is something I can take back and speak to the team about as something we can put some more thought into. In regards to my experience with customer services when we launched Bell Street, as long as you advertise the times properly, generally people will accept whatever time you open. So, for example, I remember when we launched Bell Street, we opened on Wednesday at 9:30, and people did think that was going to be quite a big issue, and that every day there'd be people waiting for an hour, and it really wasn't, because before you know it, the word does spread, and people do know. But I do appreciate it is lunchtime, that's when people will be visiting us, so I can appreciate your thoughts on it. We're trying to be as cost effective as possible. We believe the reception is what customers want, and in terms of that, that's why we designed the role to just have half an hour lunch. So if we did have to close, it would be if somebody had turned up, they wouldn't have very long to wait. And obviously they could bring the customer services team in the meanwhile. So that's why we've put it forward in that light.
Okay, Mrs. Marsh, you want to come back?
Thank you. I appreciate everything you've said. And no, I wouldn't expect there to be an issue if somewhere didn't open until half an hour later one day than another day, because people accept that. However, if you start off advertising it as a job share, you will find, as I found over many years, that you get neighbours and friends applying for the job, and one would have children in the morning and the other one would have children in the afternoon, and it made it so easy, and the job was just attractive to lots of people. So you may have had a problem just getting morning people working in Bell Street, but if you start off advertising it as a job share, you may find people come for the job that are both qualified and are there for each other anyway, which is what I found over many years. So don't just knock it out of hand.
Okay, all right, thank you. Mr. Bentley.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of things. Thank you for the report. That was very interesting. It was a very inclusive consultation, and the response from the residents was extremely good, better than we normally expect that amount, and very positive, as you said, so that was very good. Unfortunately, I can't agree with them. If we leave one person and it's a half-hour dinner, people will get used to that. I do, lots of other people do. Normally I'd agree with them, but unfortunately in this case, I can't.
You never agree with them.
So you need to do what's best. Advertise it for job share if you feel you need to. If you don't get the response, then you advertise it for one person. But it does give that one person continuity. And that one person might want, no, you've had your say.
You advertise
No falling out.
full-time and job share in the same advert.
Right,
You finish.
Yes.
come on.
But you need to do that, so you carry on. The only thing I will question is, I believe you said that we're not looking at home visits, but you skipped over that slide extremely quickly and I didn't quite see it. So are we not going to do any home visits? I thought we said we wanted them to have home visits.
So it's something that we put in the consultation because it was something that I was interested to see. Nobody asked us to put that in. It's something that I wanted to see what the view was. We already do home visits in suitable areas, and we've offered that since COVID because obviously we were, some people couldn't get in to see us. Very, very minimal amount of people use that. They're happening in housing regularly. The Financial Inclusion Officer does do home visits as well. And obviously in some of the other areas, environmental health, selective licensing, it is nature, general cause. At this point, with all the other introductions, it's not something that we're looking at introducing, but it's something we can resurvey on and see once we implement the virtual appointments, once we implement the appointment hubs and we've got the reception, we could then later on see if there is a need for it, but at this stage we have no plans.
It's just my only concern there is the people that would want an home visit are not generally the people that would have been part of the consultation.
Possibly, I can see your point. If just to reassure you, if we came across a customer that needed a home visit, absolutely, 100%, we offer that now, and we would never not find a way of helping a customer or a resident. It's more there being a bit of an assessment criteria behind that. So it wouldn't be that, you know, somebody choose, oh, I'll have a home visit rather than go into one of your appointment hubs. That won't be an option for them. We're not introducing them so you can select it as a choice. But if somebody needed a home visit, 100% we would accommodate.
Okay. Also, with regard to the telephone appointments, the booked appointments at the free hubs within the free town centres, I take it they're going to be in the libraries?
I won't confirm the locations, but I will circulate. We're in the process of just agreeing them. As soon as they're agreed, the costs and the locations will be circulated. They're all very prominent in town centres and already run community activities. And we picked them particularly because we work in partnership with all of them in one way, shape or form. But we've used them because they have a community hub feel about them already. And we feel like that will be the best, so that they have things like food banks being run from them, for example. They have Helping Hands maybe attending in the building. So, or they're a community centre of sorts. So that way we feel it's the best possible opportunity to make the appointment hubs more well known, because people are already using the locations of the building, so it has that kind of synergy to them.
Could we not have a fourth hub? Seeing as we're going to have a possible full-time or 2 part-time people at Roxhill, could that not be a fourth hub for bookable appointments or more general inquiries?
We'll have the receptionist will be there to answer any general inquiry anyway, and there'll be a customer phone there as well. So if it was something like, I don't know, somebody wanting to renew their garden waste, for example, the receptionist will be able to help them, you know, do that over the telephone. If they have an inquiry, for example, you know, a general inquiry, you know, it wasn't looking up somebody's council tax as such, but it was a general inquiry in terms of how does this work, how does that work. The receptionist will be trained to a level to be able to answer most of those inquiries.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions at all?
Yes, it's congratulate you on your patience with, I was there at the Senior Citizens Forum, and I congratulate you on the work that you did there under certain circumstances. Very difficult, so congratulations to you, being very professional in dealing with that.
Okay.
Just an experience, really. When we talk about full-time people, job share and everything else, I can only share with you the experience because I ran a small business for a local authority, a big authority. My customers, I had to relate to what my business was coming from, so I had to tailor my support staff, secretarial staff in a situation that it was better for me to have a job share rather than a full-time person because of sickness or holidays or whatever, because then I only had to cover that bit of the day rather than that bit, and it worked very well. And also, if one was off, I'm able to be flexible with the person that's coming in to come in a bit out of pay a little extra, but that was fine. But it worked quite well because of the need that I'm at for my business. I share that with you because I think it does work from a point of view when you do need cover, especially now in a situation where you're going to be, where the other bit is going to be over here, it's going to be very difficult. But I found it quite beneficial and cost effective doing that. Share that with you.
Okay. Ms. Sutton, then we're moving on.
Yeah, I think between you all, you suggested that maybe we advertise it as both. So we'll say there is a role and we will consider full-time applicants and job share, and the job share would be this pattern. And then we'll see what we get in terms of that. I don't want to delay it. I want to open it when we open. So we do need to move really quickly on the recruitment. But absolutely, I think that's a really good idea. Job share, if we can get it, would work well, and it has worked well in the past. We were just a little concerned we might not attract people, but let's try both and see what we get.
Just Lloydell, and we're moving on.
Yeah, just one very well. Home working or home visits is very, very difficult in as much that I've recommended and been in touch with the council to do home visit to a particular person who I know is safe, and that putting people into that situation on a one-to-one is safe. But if you're going to do home visits, there's an assessment that needs to be done to ensure that if you'll be lone working, and is it safe for you to see that individual? Those are very serious issues that you need to consider. There are issues that I've had to deal with in my other life where we stop people from doing home visits, or at least you've got to have two to go and visit that particular person, because we know what the issue is surrounding it. So I'll share that with you as well, to be very careful when you do that, if you do that.
Can I make my apologies?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms Hatton, for your report, and you've also got a report from the consultant as well, which backs up what you have to say. So the only decision we had to make this evening was that we want a contact point in each of the 3 town centres. That can be minuted, please. I know where we're going with that. Right, item 9, we've got presentation by the Climate Change Officer, Mr Harrison. 15 minutes maximum.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. Okay, so this presentation this evening is to present the outcomes of our climate change baseline study. Well, the main study is the report, the summary of it as well is also obviously in the agenda pack in front of you. But I'll go through the main points, and then if you have any questions, you can do that at the end, if that's okay. The report was completed by consultants AXI, and it's done for the reporting year 2019 to 20, March 2020. And that's pre-COVID, because it was considered the best year in terms of it was like normal operations. And there's 2 parts to the report. The first part is about measuring carbon emissions for the council, the carbon footprint for council operations. And the second part is what's called a trajectory report, looking at how, it's got recommendations to try how to achieve decarbonisation of council operations to move towards what's called net zero. What I mean by net zero is this idea that you minimise carbon emissions, and anything that's really difficult to remove is an offset. There's 2 sort of really important things to consider first before I move on. One is that this is a desktop report. It's not, nobody's gone round individual buildings and done a feasibility study. So there are somewhat generalised recommendations and costings. There are approximations. So it does recommend in the report that you do energy feasibility studies, for example, in the buildings that we own. And the second point, you'll notice in the report that it uses 2030 as a target for net zero. This was done for discussion purposes only. We haven't set a target as a council. So this is something other councils have done, 2030 target, although probably haven't done any sort of work like this beforehand. So it puts us in I would say puts us in a good position, because we've got evidence to say, well, can we meet a target date of this, whatever we choose, or whether we even choose a target date. But at least we've got the report and we've got the evidence to make that decision from. At the bottom, there's some terminology which is quite useful to consider. It talks about different scopes of emissions in the report. So just running through this quickly, scope 1 includes what's burnt on site. So it's gas emission, basic emissions from gas boilers or from vehicles, for example. Scope 2 is electricity, so emissions associated with purchased electricity. And then scope 3 will be from our leased assets, for example, and would include goods and services. And moving on. So our carbon footprint for the 2019-2020 baseline year was 1,651 tonnes of carbon equivalent. It says equivalent because there are other greenhouse gases apart from carbon dioxide, like methane, for example. And In terms of other councils, yeah, it's somewhat similar, but other councils might have included other things in the carbon footprint, for example, like social housing, which we didn't. Individual council housing is not included in this figure. One of the reasons for that is it's quite tricky to collect all the data. So some data's would be, most organisations would collect source 1 and 2 data, which is what we've done. But when it comes to source 3, we've got the leased assets in there, but we haven't included everything like goods and services because that's really difficult to do. So in practical terms, you would leave that out for now. Maybe in the future you would put that in. But it wasn't deemed to be practical to collect it. In the report recommends certain decarbonisation actions to reach to net zero, which I'll run through in a moment. But if you look at the diagram below, you've got emissions by source. Essentially, the biggest 3 emission sources for the council are leased assets at 37%. That's like the leisure centres, for example. Gas consumption from council-owned and managed properties at 25%, and fuel for vehicles at 18%. So perhaps if you were looking at an action plan, you would prioritise those highest emitters first. Anything that you couldn't reduce, very difficult to reduce emissions, you could offset using either land-based PV or tree planting schemes. Don't want to do that. And for scope 3, the largest missing contributor is purchased goods and services. So that's pretty difficult to collect, as I said before. It's missed out on here. If you were to include it, it could be like 80% of the council's carbon footprint. So it would like swamp, basically, scope 1 and 2 emissions. So that's something to bear in mind when we're talking about that 1,650 tonnes. So moving on. So there are a series of interventions that are put into that report. And I suppose the interventions could be, well, they are like insulation, LED lights, air source heat pumps, low emission vehicles. So they're recommendations. We're not saying that these are the things we're definitely going to do. It's just these are the things that you could do to reach net zero. There's 3 different scenarios that they presented, and each scenario delivers different amounts of carbon cutting, and also it's going to affect the cost as well. So the top scenario, the blue line, if you did nothing, the council really didn't do much at all, decarbonise its operations, then you'll probably get, because the grid would decarbonise as more green technology was used, like renewables, you'd probably get about a 13% reduction on the baseline by 2030, 35. But that's going to leave you with an awful amount of carbon to offset. So I suppose business as usual is deemed to be acceptable. If you were to implement all the interventions in the report, but didn't switch to air source heat pumps and just improve the gas boilers or replace them with more efficient ones, then perhaps you could get around about a 70% reduction in carbon emissions by 2030. So quite a significant amount of reduction, but not as significant as if you used air source heat pumps as well, which is the red line, and you probably get over 90% reduction and leave you with about 157 tonnes of carbon to offset, which can be done through, as I say, land-based PV, if that potentially could be done through land-based PV or tree planting schemes. You can see the more carbon you want to cut, the more cost it is, particularly around air source heat pumps, very expensive now, but in the future that technology should be cheaper. The cost should come down. So there may be a case for delay actually in that area. The costings are this, now that remember this is approximate, 13.3 million. But that's like a premium cost it does not include planned spend anyway. You would, the council would be spending money to improve the efficiency of its buildings anyway. So that cost is not included in that 13.3 million. There are some savings, say around about 300,000 by 2030 from efficiencies as well. But a lot of it, 4.6 million of that cost would be air source heat pumps, which is why it's expensive to switch to air source heat pumps. But on the other hand, that's where the government's putting money in terms of funding that you can access. Whereas for renewables, likely, because you get some payback off it, the council would have to fund that itself. So they're the three sort of trajectories, and quite interesting to consider in terms of the amount of carbon you need to cut in terms of the cost as well. Next steps, we currently have an environment strategy and action plan. The idea is to review that, do a full review of that, use this report to feed into that and the recommendations, and to have a more stronger focus on climate change and reducing carbon emissions. And the report then lists, towards the end of the APSI report, there's some various different sort of factors it asks the council to consider really, and particularly about buy-in in terms that if you want to tackle climate change, it can't be done by just like one or two people in the council. It has to be a whole council approach. Everyone's going to be on board. Climate change cuts across all the different council areas, so everyone needs to be involved in from that point of view. And also, further down it talks about collecting data. If we need a baseline, so going forward we can say, well, have we reduced emissions from the baseline? We need to track our progress. So we've done that baseline, we've collected that data. We need to make sure we can keep collecting the data to show that we're making progress. So collecting data is really important. It'd be something that would be on, when you're doing an action plan, that would be something that's a high priority. Make sure you collect the data in a way that is convenient and easy to do. And the other thing it mentions in the bullet points is about funding. As I said before, there is funding available for, say, like air source heat pumps. We need to make sure that we're in a position to apply for that. I think the last, I was going to read from actually the sort of summary of the report I made, because that's quite useful just to finish off really. So it says local authorities are typically, like Oakley and Wixton, responsible for between 2 to 5% of emissions. So in the wider borough, that's where most of the emissions are. A future strategy and action plan will provide a longer term roadmap for tackling climate change both internally and in the wider borough. It will set out our priorities given finite resources and a time frame for taking action linking to existing strategies. It will enable the council to lead by example through its own decarbonisation actions, influence local reductions in emissions and shape the wider climate agenda through its policy engagement and partnership work. And so I think the important thing is we need to show to others in the wider borough and other communities that we've done our bit, we've decarbonised and we've led by example. And that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you. Right, questions? There we go. Ms. Bentley was just by a short. Mrs.
Thank you, Mr. Lantry. Thank you, Chair. Right, so this certainly is an ambitious plan and one that we should aspire to achieve, but as it has been mentioned, Mr. Harrison mentioned that there are factors beyond our control in terms of funding and other things. But have we started the conversation on factors which are in our control? For example, having a conversation with the leisure centres to see what kind of renewable energy they could use to heat their pools. For example, solar panels, and I think somebody mentioned a couple of days ago using redundant or old batteries to heat the pools. And also, my last question I know you talked about, Mr. Harrison, you talked about mitigating the carbon footprint, what we can't reduce. Do you know how many trees would we have to plant to mitigate that?
I don't, on the last question, I'm not quite sure how many trees now. I'd have to find that information out. If it was down to 157 tonnes, we probably could work that out fairly easily. So I'll get back to you on that. I think the next steps is that you're right, we need to go around the different council departments and have that conversation about what is possible now, what have you planned in for the next couple of years or longer, and then what are your longer term ambitions if funding was available? Because obviously there isn't the 13 million, I mean, even if we include planned spending, it's not there. So we need government support, we'll need government support to achieve the target like every other council. In terms of leisure centres, there is some work going on with all the other districts as well, because they're having the same issues about leisure centres and the cost of running leisure centres. Is the sort of funding, first of all, is the funding available for like energy feasibility studies to be done in those centres so they can work out what do you need to do to reduce, carbon emissions and costs, basically. And can you put renewables like solar panels on the roof? Because there's a large space. So it's getting the funding for the feasibility study. So there's work going on to see whether that funding can be put in place and then, or even producing like a toolkit that could be used by different authorities to actually work out what's the best option for each leisure centre. So there is quite a bit of work now starting to take place across Leicestershire on that as well.
I'm going to bring Mr. Gillane on this one. Just a moment.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, there was an announcement yesterday that there's a £63 million fund, which is going to be announced tomorrow, which is going to be managed by Sport England in respect of leisure centres. £40 million of that is to provide renewable investment opportunities over the next few years, and £23 million is going to help with the cost to make these essential local hubs more energy efficient. And all local authorities that operate leisure centres or have leisure centres operated by private companies or charities are able to bid for that funding. So that was literally announced yesterday.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to bring Mr. Boyce in now. We can
hear him.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me this time?
Yes.
Oh, right. First things first, I think it's an excellent report. And I think the area which seems to me to be obvious is if we take it on board over the next 7 or 8 years, anything that needs renewing needs to be renewed as carbon neutral. So this 13 million, which in many ways is a guess, so it could be higher or lower. But one way of offsetting that money is, for instance, the vehicles for the fleet in terms of refuse. We need to do the work now about what we're going to change to, not now, possibly not even the next vehicle, but the one after, certainly, so that we can spread the cost and the cost can make sense. Because actually, if you change the vehicles now, by 2030, you'll have changed them again. So we need to be future-proofing all of the time. The other issue, which is a personal one, I dislike intensely this offsetting. Basically, if we all offset everything we did by buying trees, unless you have the land to put them on yourself, you are taking that land out of use, productive use somewhere else. And food production in Britain, I suspect, is probably now more important than carbon neutrality in the short term. Basically, we need to be much more sensible about land usage. So I think it's an excellent report, but we need to build it in going forward.
Thank you. Mr. Bentley.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst I agree totally with my two colleagues, it is a very good report, very long, takes a lot of reading. But It's an aspiration, as Councillor Hatt says. It's something that can never ever really be fully achieved, but we've got to lead by example. We've got to do as much as possible to reduce the carbon footprint of this council and encourage the reduction of carbon footprint across the whole borough. I do believe it's a very good project for partnership working, because not only us have got to do it, but the other 6 district councils, Leicestershire Council and Leicester City Council, we've all got to do this. So if it could be formed as a partnership working to both reduce our costs and increase the impact, that would be good. It's been talked about our waste wagons. But the county council states where they have to go to unload, and maybe the county council could assist in reducing that travel. Being a bit pessimistic there. But, I can't actually agree with our leader at the moment about offsetting, because there's certain things you've got to offset, like people. We're carbon producing machines. I believe we put about 4% of the carbon impact on this planet, human beings solely. But we can't get rid of us, but we can put trees in place. And I'm quite happy to put trees in my garden. I'm doing that already. I've got lots of trees in my garden. I'd like to put a few more in. And there are places around the borough that we can do that. We've got Broxhill, which is a lovely place. We could put more trees around there. We've got parks, we can put trees in. We can offset, but the aspiration, as Councillor Boyce has said, is to actually reduce by renewing. Okay, so it's an aspiration that we need to aspire to and lead by example. But is it possible to look at partnership working?
Mr. Harrison?
It's not only possible, we are doing quite a lot of partnership working currently with the different districts, all the districts really across Leicestershire and the Leicestershire County Council. So there's schemes like, for example, Solar Together, which is currently running the partnership scheme. There's EV charge point schemes that potentially will be useful in terms of putting extra EV infrastructure across the borough. So there are already partnership schemes operating, and they look set to continue, and that's an area that's developing. So there's quite a lot going on in that area because it's basically, it's difficult for each individual district council to try and tackle, you can't tackle climate change on your own. Everyone has to sort of work together, share knowledge resources, and that's the sort of thing that's starting to, over the last year particularly, that's quite a big change that I think has happened, that sort of partnership working across Leicestershire. So yeah, that's definitely an area that's.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Any other speakers? No? We're asked to note the report. All in favour of noting the report, please indicate. Thank you. Move on to item 10, which is the right to buy receipts. Mr. Thorpe, words of one syllable, please.
Well, I'll try. As members are aware, when the council receives a capital receipt due to the sale of one of its properties under the Right to Buy programme, it is able to invest this money to replace the home sold under the Right to Buy scheme. There are strict rules in terms of how the scheme operates, including, for example, the fact that only 40% of the Right to Buy receipts can be spent on the cost of new homes, with the remainder having to be provided by the council's HRA, and a deadline by which the Right to Buy receipt has to be spent. As shown in the table at paragraph 2.3 of the report, currently the council has a total of £678,000 in Right to Buy receipts. With the necessary 60% contribution from the council's HRA, this amounts to a total of just under 1.7 million available to spend on new homes. It's set out in paragraph 2.5. The spending of this will be managed through the new Housing Supply Capital Programme and focus on delivering new housing or aid in Wigston. I've appointed Exi Group to deliver the Hawthorne Lane project. Exi Group have successfully demonstrated their ability to provide resource and expertise to drive forward projects such as this, as has been the case with Newlands Hall, Yellows Park Community Hub project, and the sale of Reformer Newton Hall. Project initiation stage, which is the stage that we're currently at for Hawthorne Lane, Exi Group's work programme indicates that this timescale is achievable. And I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Any questions at all? Mrs. Hack?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I don't claim to understand this report, but all I want to know that are we able to take advantage of the new scheme in full? Is there a risk that we could lose the retained amount?
Mr. Thorpe?
So there's a deadline by which various amounts of money has to be spent. In the past, we've always managed to make sure that we have spent money and not lost it. There are various ways that we can spend money. So, for example, we could purchase a property if we needed to. The best way, and the way that we're trying to achieve things moving forward, is to spend the whole of the money that's available to us on the bigger scheme that will have greatest impact. And that's what we're looking at doing in terms of Hawthorne Lane.
Okay, Mrs. Hack, want to come back?
Thank you, Chair. It also mentions about partnership working. If we go down the route of partnership working, do we have any control over those houses? If we decide to do that in future?
Councillor Hack, can you point me to where I'm referring to?
It was with the Housing Association. But in future, it did say that the council could work with housing associations and use those credits.
Yeah, and I think in theory that is something that we can do under the scheme, but it's not something that we're looking to do currently, so I don't think that's an issue that we need to be concerned about.
Any other questions at all? I know it's a complicated report, but I think it's important we understand what is involved in this. I'm sure the committee that it's not my intention to give the money back to the government. It will be spent on our residents one way or the other in this borough. Mrs. Bull, take note. Thank you. We note the report. All in favour? Thank you. Move on to item 11. Mr. Gill.
Thank you, Chair. This report was requested at the last Service Delivery Committee where members wanted a report on the status of the bins that are in Bell Street. The position is that we have 7 bins in Bell Street that are not in the best of condition, and as at the time of writing, 4 of the 7 bins were missing lids. The question for members this evening is whether or not you're going to look to remove the bins and replace them, or to try and repair them by obtaining new lids for them. Although we're not sure whether the lids are still in production because they may have been discontinued. So officers are requesting members to point us in the direction they would want to go if we were to replace the bins with bins that match the street style. The reality is that we would reduce the number of bins from 7 to 4 or 5, but they would be much larger. I think you're all aware of these bins where they get a pizza box stuck in the top and then all of a sudden we've got rubbish flowing all over the floor. So we'd look to rationalise and provide a more effective bin provision in Bell Street.
Thank you. I'm going to start and then I'll bring Mr. Bentley in. I'm going to say that we are not going to purchase new lids for the bins. That option's out the window. I'd like it noted quite clearly that members agree, we remove the bins in Bell Street and replace them with a new suitable bin immediately. I don't want a situation where the bins disappear and nothing goes back. I want bin out, bin in, so that it's available. Mr. Bentley.
Thank you, Chair. I totally agree with you. The existing bins need removing as quickly as possible, but also require replacing as quickly as possible. So I think personally we should delegate to the officers to actually bring that about and make sure that they purchase the suitable bins and putting them in the suitable places. If it's a reduction in the number of bins, but an increase in the size of the bins, I don't personally have a problem with that, but we need the provision.
Thank you. Any other questions at all? Mr. Gildy showed me some designs of bins earlier this evening, which I don't know whether...
I'm not sure whether members could see. Unfortunately, they're in black and white, but they are... We currently have a lot of the square metal bins which are green and gold. There's an alternative which is a stainless steel bin, and then there's a black one. So what officers will do is have a look to see which is the most appropriate. The bins already in Bell Street are stainless steel, so it would tend to suggest that if we're going to replace them and match the street scene, we may well go for the stainless steel one so that it matches up. But I'm sure Councillor Bolter, as Chair of Services, will have the opportunity of expressing his opinion once we've decided.
Right, okay. So the recommendation is that the bins are removed and new bins put in place immediately. So there's no coupling provision. And officers select whichever bin they think is suitable for the location. And I'm sure Mr. Marbrook may consult me on his decision at the end of the day.
Chair.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Councillor Walsh.
Sorry, Chair, to interrupt. You're using the word immediately. I don't think the word immediately is either deliverable or appropriate. I think within the next 14 days would be reasonable if it's achievable. Immediately, I think you are setting yourself up for failure.
Mr. Boyce, I appreciate that. What I'm going to ask Mr. Gill to do is the officer concerned get the number of bins ordered that are required, whether it be 4 or 5, get the delivery date for those. When they've arrived, arrange for the contractor to remove the bins that are in Bell Street and reinstate the new bin at the same time. Whatever time that is. Is that agreed by all? Can I have a vote on that, please, so they're not hung out to dry? Thank you. That's the last item on the agenda for this evening. Thank you for your deliberations over the last 12 months. Thank you for your support. That's the last meeting this cycle, and thank you for bearing with me on these difficult issues. Thank you much indeed.
Bearing with us.
Thank you.